Hello, fellow innovators. This is Patrick Emmons.
And this is Shelley Nelson.
Welcome to the Innovation and the Digital Enterprise podcast, where we interview successful visionaries and leaders, giving you an insight into how they drive and support innovation within their organizations. Today, we're excited to welcome Christina Garcia. She's a Senior Vice President of Engineering at Echo Global Logistics. Christina is a visionary leader with a rich blend of technical and business expertise. Her career spans significant achievements in engineering, strategic technology implementation, and team leadership in a high transaction environment. Christina's journey bridges the gap between in-depth technical solutions like blockchain for enhancing authenticity and strategic business outcomes aimed at elevating both individuals and the overall business. She is deeply engaged in the evolving landscape of cloud technology, digital payments, and the pressing challenges posed by advancements in deep fakes. We're excited to have Christina share her insights on navigating career transitions, the distinctions between being a developer and engineer, and her proactive approach to mentoring and participating in the panels and organizations that shape the future of technology. So welcome to the show, Christina.
Oh, I'm so happy to be here. I'm so humbled. Thank you. What a great introduction.
Christina, if you don't mind, can you share with our listeners a little bit more about your role at Echo?
Sure. So I'm the Senior Vice President of Engineering. I'm responsible for our product development teams, agilists, architects, as well as our Quality Assurance Center of Excellence. We're responsible for delivering the solutions and the cutting edge technology, innovative logistics solutions that simplify the complexities of transportation management for our clients. We do real-time tracking and analytics to optimize freight management. We're dedicated to delivering reliability and efficiency across the supply chain. As we navigate the ever-evolving landscape of global logistics, our mission remains steadfast to provide seamless and sustainable logistics solutions that propel our business forward. And I'm really excited to be here, not only to talk about what we're doing here at Echo, but how it transcends across all of the technology landscape as we continue to navigate such an ever-evolving space.
It's great stuff. Christina, you've been in tech your entire professional career, if I'm not mistaken. Is that correct?
Yes. I'm not going to say how many years that is.
Well, we're not going to know. That would be impolite.
Yes, all three of them.
You're quite an achiever. You've gotten very far in 36 months. I am curious, though, how did you get started in software?
It's a funny story. I know a lot of individuals today, they have the option of computer science and they know what it is and they go into school pursuing it. For me, I was the firstborn of two high school dropouts. So it was, you're going to be a doctor, you're going to be a lawyer. And I'm the first to go to college. So I'm like, all right, pre-med, here we go. Because it just seemed more fun. I love science. And then you take a gross human anatomy class. So we go to visit this lab and they're like, oh, you're working academic. Wait, I'm touching dead people? I didn't know that when I chose my major. And I was like, oh my God, I need a new major. Luckily, I had a computer science 101 class as an elective, which my advisor had recommended that I take, just given my mathematics and science lean for my pre-med degree. And I fell in love with the black and white, the class. You were right. It was very mathematical, very no touching dead people. I knew at the end of the day that my solutions were going to work. It was the dopamine hit of, yay, it was great. So hence I just kept pursuing that path. And here I am, a software engineer and now a technology leader. And I still get the dopamine hit when I have a problem solved or when I see an engineer come up with an aha moment. I'm like, yes, so wonderful. So it really started from not wanting to touch dead people, like honestly.
That's awesome.
I was curious, do you still touch code from time to time? Do you?
Yes. I mean, I dabble in it, not for work, but at home, I like to stay abreast of a lot of technology and I'll play around with it. So as newer languages come up like Mojo, I'll play around with it. And my son, who is 9 years old, wants to be an engineer. So together we do little coding projects and we're doing that. My daughter's had no desire to walk in my footsteps, but my son is. So I take every advantage to code with him and make it fun.
Oh, that's awesome. That's really cool. One of the things we talked about when we discussed being on the podcast, and I thought was really interesting, was your perspective as technologists building things is important, right? And making sure they're built with quality, making sure that they're resilient, right? They're readable, all those good things about software. But I think your perspective on making sure that you're building the right things. So do you mind sharing your perspective about why the difference between a programmer, software engineer, and how it's important to focus on building the right things?
I learned this along the way. So I'm not going to claim that I was the genius who came up with it in the middle of the night, like, Einstein did with his theories. But I've come across and have seen there's these two mindsets, the developer mindset and the engineering mindset. The developer mindset is I can, so I will, or I'm told to, and I'm just going to code and make it happen. The engineer mindset is really about what is the ultimate problem? What am I trying to solve? How do I do that ethically? And how do I do that for the ultimate good for our customers, for our users? How do we use these solutions to actually improve where we need to improve? And even with AI, we ask a lot of these questions. What is it solving? How is it making it better? How do we make sure it doesn't have an adverse effect? So going into a solution, really saying, what is the problem? What am I ultimately trying to solve? Who am I solving it for? And how do I do it right in the right way so that it can grow and shape and live and evolve with the ever-changing needs of your customer base or your business or the processes, whether it be a financial process or even just a user experience. So
How did you come to that? I mean, like you mentioned, was there an evolution? Is there a pivotal moment when you realized that, from my perspective, I think I had that moment like right after the dot-com bust of like, hey, they don't pay us to just write code, right? Like we actually have to have these three-letter letters became very important. ROI,
yeah.
right? Like they have to get value back. And so that's right before that, it was like, hey, they pay me to write code because I'm awesome.
I'm awesome. Well, even ROI, there's I can develop a solution to deliver the ROI, or I can architect and engineer a solution that gets us beyond where we are today, right? Because ROI is very short-term focused versus long-term focused. And I think there was a project in my life, and I'm not going to share much about it, but it seemed like a very tinkery project, right? Like it was, we can, so we should, and therefore we could build a business case around it. The almost if you build it, they will come kind of thing, but they never
Mm-hmm.
came. And I was just like, maybe we approached this wrong. Maybe we put the cart before the horse because we really just wanted to say that we could do this thing. And some R&D is good like that, right? Some of that R&D and pie in the sky you should be doing, but you also have to step back to make sure that like the R&D that you're doing has some ultimate long-term goal for improving something, not just, hey, it's so catchy and cool, we think it's going to make a ton of money, like Google Glass or anything like that. Yeah, catchy and cool, but what did it really solve? And as you see, it's no longer on the market. So really engineering for the viability of solutions for needs and really sitting with the problem and saying, as a user with this problem, what do I ultimately need? Not, hey, this is really cool and I think it's great. And so I have a business case that says it's going to sell a million things because it's just cool and people like to buy cool things. Like, I don't know. That's just a perspective that I've seen. And it tends to serve me and my teams well because the solutions we architect are simple, lovable, complete, and ultimately allow us to continue to add value over and over and beyond.
Very interesting. Is that something you're trying to develop? Like, I know sometimes when you engage with the product teams, or at least from my experience, when you engage with product teams, understanding that long-term value, what is important now from a business perspective versus that even far horizon, like this is, do you struggle with creating that clarity for the folks on your team?
It comes down to narrative and storytelling, and that goes back to like influence as well, right? If you're able to truly understand what your product individuals are asking for now, or your business individuals are asking for now, you could take them through a narrative of a story. Well, what does this look like in the future? Or what if this happens? Or what if it changes like that? You start to go through the what ifs and they're like, oh yeah, that makes sense. And I could see that. Or, oh, this might happen in the future. In which case now you have additional narrative to bring to your engineers when you're talking about when we're architecting this, like these are potential outliers. Okay. So build in a way that allows you to adapt and pivot for X, Y, and Z in the future in case it comes up or it needs to come up. So I don't like to sit with product and say, okay, I got your order and now I know what you
Mm-hmm.
want. I really want to understand from them what it goes back to understanding the problem. What is the problem? Who is my user in this situation? Give me that persona. Help me understand who they are and why they need this and what their real problem is. And ultimately, like, because they're using our solutions to do something in their life, whether it is pay bills or get their groceries, or for us, move transport. So how do I help them be more efficient and effective? Yes, they're asking for this one functionality now, but what are the additional changes? Like, let's go down the chain of all the tasks that they have to be really successful in their own right. And how do I build the solutions to help them do that, or architect at least to make sure that it's viable for us to quickly do it in the future?
Do you have, I don't know, I've heard stories of different organizations, especially when you get into some of the hard tech, understanding and appreciating the solutions that you're building. Do you have your engineers or lead engineers actually go out and like see how the solutions actually operate and like problems that they solve? And
So from prior orgs, it has been a thing for me to have my engineers sit on help desk calls, sit on support calls. At Echo, I'm still a year in, so I'm working on getting them to sit with the business, watch them do work, sit on those performance calls. Actually, we recently started having our business partners come into our PI planning and talk about how they use their solutions. Again, like, there's a slide deck and here's all your objectives and your features, but having the business person come in and say, this is how we use it. This is how it manifests itself. This is like what our customers are telling us about the solution. That creates that little connection, and that connection allows them, without me even asking, how do you make sure that we're servicing this beyond all that? So that understanding and that like personification of the value of what you're doing, like, unlocks tremendous potential for architecting and developing things with higher quality, because they know who's on the end of it. It's not just ones and zeros and, little algorithms here and there, but it's value. When I was at, Office Max and at Kroger, it was always like, if your grandmother was in the store shopping, what is the experience you would want them to have with your software? How do you make that meaningful for them and help them do what they need to do as they need to do it in that moment without friction, without frustration? So I always try and true back with the engineers, or if this issue pops up, or if you didn't have monitoring on it and they're catching it for you, like, how did they feel in that moment? What's the emotion? Almost like you're in a traffic jam and it's frustrating, right? Like, well, that's what they're feeling on these prod calls. Get it solved now.
wow.
And learn the lesson so that you can fix it in the future and not follow the same, pitfalls. Because, stuff's going to break, but you learn, you adjust, and you gracefully handle, or you self-heal in the future because now you've learned from it. If we don't learn from it, that's when we ultimately fail for delivering value for our customers, because we keep hitting that same issue over and over again.
Interesting. Going with the constantly improving, what are some of the biggest challenges when you're working with maybe a new member of the team, or, as you said, you've been there for a year? One of our listeners was trying to imitate what you're doing. What would they anticipate being some of the biggest challenges that they'd need to prepare for and maybe start working on how to approach?
Oh, that's a great question. I mean, shifting left is a huge shift in how you code solutions. It's like starting with the thought of how are things going to break and then coding for those failures. It's really taking the engineers through the journey of why this is so valuable and what it ultimately saves. Because no engineer wants to write the test cases, just like they don't want to. However, they also don't want to sit on the prod incident call. So if you tell
definitely, they don't want that
effort that you do right here, like, saves a lot later on, and it costs less of your time and energy. I think the other thing is Simon said it, but start with why. Why is it important that we automate our tests? Why is it important that we think about how this could break before we're even writing a line of code? Why is it important to think about how you observe and monitor its performance in production so that you catch issues or prevent them before your customers do? Highlighting it goes back to the narrative of like how you architect. If you know exactly why it's so valuable what you're doing, you start to then embody how you become better as a champion of quality. And then you hold them accountable to it, right? during prod incidents, make sure that they're accountable if their solutions are. And it's not like we're calling out blame, but accountable to like recognizing the root cause, coming back and say, okay, let's do an RCA. Let's identify from a retro perspective, what happened? What could we do better? And then communicate out to all of your peers in the org the lessons you learned so that someone else can avoid that in the future. Because things do fail. We're human, we're imperfect. But as long as we're able to change the way we work to mitigate that and learn from those mistakes and bring that forward across everything and share those learnings, those lessons, the better. So some of the hurdles is, trying to go too fast because you help it and not having spent the time on the why. Silos of communication, when those failures happen, the team solves it, but they're not then taking the time to let the rest of the org know to learn and share from those lessons because they're valuable. Even if that MQ failure was specific to that one incident, like the replications of it or like the pattern of why it failed could be very applicable to other things. So really take that to heart. And I think the other things is just also being clear and holding accountability. What you allow to manifest in your org is seen as, okay, that's the bar, as we talked about earlier. And if your bar is no, we want quality and done means this, and then holding people accountable at that, like that becomes the de facto standard for great and good and done in your solutions and your strategy.
Christina, I couldn't help but see the 5 sticky notes on your wall. So would you mind if we ask what those are?
So I have little notes to remind myself about like leadership and just remembering that it is my choice for how I respond to situations, right? Things are neither bad nor good. They're fact, and it is my perspective in the moment. So this allows me during a prod incident call to maintain calm and like recognize it, or to remember that like everyone who just is acknowledged and seen is recognized. So they're just my little like lead by listening and just little reminders for myself of, being present and true in moments of the day and remembering why I'm here. And that is to be of service and the vehicle of service and success for all of my team.
That's awesome.
It's really awesome stuff to remember. Like, it's hard. Leading is hard. It's lonely, right? And sometimes you definitely need to like pull yourself out of the moment. As a person who struggles with that, how's it going? What's your batting average at of like?
Oh, wow. Some days are better than others. I think that like
Always
I have a
improving.
very high bar for myself. And so like, if I feel that my team is struggling, right, that's me. That's my fault, right? Like I own that. I mean, overall, honestly, I have never worked with such incredible engineers who really just care about doing things. And I've worked with some great companies. And like, I feel like with each role I take, I'm just like surprised that the talent is just incredible. Like everywhere and this group of individuals is incredible. And they've just been so passionate about growing and moving into modern technology. And it's wonderful to see the excitement. We've completed just a really challenging bit of work that took over a year to navigate through. And when you're building greenfield, a system that has been in place for decades, we'll say, there's a lot of nuance in that. So you go in thinking, oh, it's so easy to build something net new, but you're like, no, I'm not really building it net new because the net new thing has to work with this thing. So you're in this hybrid state, but we completed this incredibly challenging project and I'm really proud of them. And there were moments that it seemed really frustrating because there's this date and everyone's like, oh my God, the date, and it's stressful. And it's always like that date is set by you control what you control. And if new information comes in, we adapt, we adjust, right? And we change scope. We change our plan, we make alternatives, we adjust the plan. So I think the biggest thing for me right now is helping the engineers feel truly empowered to take control of what they can control. And we can set a date based on what we know and what is in our control. And when new information comes up or a situation changes, like we adjust, we have new information and we make better decisions. I think it was Maya Angelou that said that you make the best decision you have with the information. When you learn more, you do better. Right. And I think that's what I'm trying to teach my engineers, because a lot of them feel like, oh, I feel so stressed that date's not moving. I'm like, well, if there's a reason to move it, if we've learned something new, then we do the right thing and we move it so that we don't end up working so hard and like sacrificing quality, right? You don't want to sacrifice the quality. What you want to do is say, what is within my control and how do I navigate? So the ultimate result is that I'm delivering quality and still getting it over the finish line. I don't know if I answered your question, but
I was going to say, I think our listeners will be really intrigued by the fact that you said you have such an amazing team. Everybody's so passionate. So just out of curiosity, did you inherit that team? Did you hire them? How do you build such strong, passionate teams?
a lot of it is inherited. I did do some hiring, but it is inherited. And I think that the culture of the organization is first and foremost. If you have a great culture in an organization, then great people are just naturally there because they're driven to being in a culture. And Echo's culture is like, we carry the load together. We do hard stuff, but we do it together. And I think that becomes part of the reason that this team is so great because they're always willing to lend a hand and to learn from each other. And no one is shy to say, I got your back or help you, which is absolutely incredible. And there's no of this, it's me and I was the reason then the superhero this got done. It was, hey, here's the team and kudos to this group over here who helped us and our partners over in DevOps. So it's absolutely incredible to see that. And that's the culture. I think the other thing is when I came into the org, I met with everyone. I think it's important as a leader to meet with everyone on the team and have a personal relationship. So even if it's a 15-minute coffee talk with them, just to say, tell me your story. I want to know why you're here. I want to know what your goals are. And that connection allows me to reach out to them and say, how are you doing? Even on Slack, or see them on a Teams call and say, how's this looking? This issue seemed hairy. What did you find? Right. And then when I send my week in review emails and I talk about things like accountability or our need to do better job of communicating or documentation, and I do send emails every week just about what's going on in the org and what are the themes I saw about opportunities that we have, like they'll read it because now they know that what I'm saying, it's succinct and it's there, but it's there for a reason because it's tied to our strategy and our technology goals. So a lot of it has to do with the leader putting in the effort to build a lot of the relationships and the communication channels so that they can feel like you got their back, and therefore they'll go out and they'll tackle that next task. And when you say, I know this is hard, but I believe you can do it, and they trust you because you know them, you see them, you recognize that they're there and the hard work that they're doing.
It's awesome. Shelley, I know your role, you're constantly looking for the next level of leaders in a number of different organizations. Listening to Christina talk about that communication, is that the stuff that you're looking for, the rapport building, the relationship building?
Yeah, so I think the first thing Christina mentioned was culture, right? And that's definitely part of it. People want to work with other great people and great teams. And also just the mission, right? If people aren't tied to the mission, and they're not tied to the attributes that you hire for, it's not going to work. And so you absolutely want to set people up for success.
Awesome. Something else, Christina, you brought up a while back was that you have a high bar for yourself. And I think that's true of most leaders. That's why they get promoted and they get to the levels that they get to. But many struggle with, they think that their bar is everybody's bar and that it creates a lot of friction for people who don't have such a high bar. Is that something you've had to address as you've progressed through your promotions and as you've advanced and you've grown in the 3 years that you've been out of college? I mean,
Yes.
It was compressed time frame, so clearly.
Yes, exactly. These past 3 months have just been incredibly learning. No. So I did the Clifton Strengths, and my number 1 is achiever, and my number 5 is competition. So my top 5 is pretty heavy. I'm constantly competing with myself, but the blind spot of that is that you now think everybody operates that way and that they feel and think the same way as you. And going through learning about my own strengths and recognizing the downside, but also recognizing that, hey, there's 34 of these and not everyone looks like me. And it takes all of them to make things happen, has allowed me to really lean into setting clear expectations with the individuals I have, recognizing that they might not have my bar, but setting those clear expectations and allowing them to use their strengths to meet those expectations. But it's on me to set those expectations, right? I can't just assume that they're going to operate in my mindset and say, as an achiever, I'm going to get this done in the next hour because I don't know what else is on. So I'm going to set the expectations and allow them to negotiate with me based on that, because they may have other things that they're working on, and allow them to use their strengths to achieve it. Where you fall, and then I learned this, in the past 6 months, we'll say, of my 3-year tenure as a corporate citizen, is if you expect something of somebody without communicating, because at the end of the day, you're let down. If they don't know what your expectations are, if they don't know what they're being held accountable to deliver or when, then you're hurt because you set the expectation without being clear with them. So I don't like hurting myself. So I'm going to do my diligence of communicating what I expect when. And then if an expectation then falls through, we now have an opportunity to say there's a coaching opportunity here to drive the performance and meet the expectations, whether it is, hey, renegotiate as something happens. So be proactive in your communication, or navigate your own task structure to get these things done in time.
Awesome. I use this mental image of slow down. Right. So, and I've done the strength finder. Sally, have you done strength finders?
I haven't.
Oh, you should. It's kind of eye-opening, honestly.
It really is. It really kind of gives you an idea of like, oh, so that's why I do that stupid stuff. Okay. And I think a lot of leaders struggle with this, especially when you're an achiever or competitive and you're a pusher, right? Like you're pushing to get things done. Is that you get to a point of your own success where people are like, hey, you're creating a lot of friction, and people think, oh, that's a bad part of me. And I think that's a mistake. I think the idea that like you're going to label that capacity as bad. And I use this metaphor of like, it's like Cyclops from the X-Men comic books, right? When he's got the visor on and he can direct the energy to the right places, it's really powerful. If he takes the visor off, it's just kind of blowing everything up. And I think that's, but it's the same about all of our strengths, as they are our strengths, but then when we're in a state of stress, they're generally our weaknesses as well. So understanding that, like, when you're stressed out, I'm the same way. I'm going to push, right? That's my default mode of like, okay, things are stressful. Let's work even harder, right? Let's push even harder. And it causes a lot of challenges for a lot of people. So specifically myself. And to your point, I don't like to cause pain for myself, but always seem to be able to do it, right? Like they're just kind of in there somewhere. So kind of pivoting a little bit, you did touch on this before with the relationship building and the strategic outcomes, right? We can move the dates, we can move things around. Some dates can't be moved though, right? There's a certain point where there's like business objectives. It's normally not the case that there are like
there's certain,
dates.
You're right.
Yeah.
Like there are certain government issued dates, there are mandates and MRAs that cannot. But what can be adjusted in that is you have the opportunity to adjust the design, how many individuals are supporting the effort. So there are still things within your control to help.
Awesome.
You're never at the mercy, right? There is always opportunities to creatively solve.
That's right. Funny enough, I was doing some quarterly planning with an employee, and we were doing a rock, and one of the rocks was to get 100 of something done. And we did a little bit of a strategic discussion about what's going to be the barrier. We went through it, and I said, listen, what's one of the things we can change here? And they're like, well, I don't know, this, that, it's like, we could change the number from 100 to 65. I'm like, yeah. I'm like, well, would that make it easier for us to succeed? It's like, yes. Do we get all the objectives accomplished? Yes. So it's like, all we had to do was change the number. So to your point, there is a lot of times when people do planning, it's a little bit more optimistic than important, right? Is that something that you think about when you come up with, because you mentioned PI planning, and for those who don't know, that's a scaled agile framework concept where you're getting all of your development teams on one page about like, what are we getting done in the next 3 months is, I think, traditionally how it's done. Is that how you guys do it?
Yeah. 12 weeks. Yeah.
Yeah. So is there something that you're doing when you're engaged with those groups to kind of help them reset to realistic? Because I think whenever you get in those meetings, Everybody's eyes are bigger than their stomach.
Yeah, a lot of, and my directors do an incredible job with this, as well as, our team leads, is looking at the work and do you understand what done looks like here? And if not, slice it smaller. If you
Hmm.
can't slice it small enough where you know what done looks like, then your estimates on it are going to be lower confidence because you probably could be missing things that must be done in there. And then you'll be scrambling toward the end of a sprint or something to say, how do I fill all this in? So I think first and foremost is really consistently having your scrum masters and your team leads challenge the teams to say, is this sliced small enough so that you understand what done is so that you could actually estimate effectively on it? Because when you're in that 12-week period, you should have enough work at a level that you should be able to estimate whether or not you can commit to doing that within, again, your own control. Situation outside of it, whether like the environment goes down or somehow Amazon East goes down again, like it did 10 years ago. You can't control that, but the things you can control, slice it small enough. I think the other thing I like to do with the teams is as they're navigating certain critical objectives and you're close to where you need to be, because we also layer on this concept of date-driven agile for it, because when you have to do change management with your business or your customers, either on like a mobile app or something for your customers, it's important that those dates are kind of known far enough out in advance so that you can line up the training and all of that for your user community. So there is this concept of having not, some level of even 6 month knowing what a date is on some work, even though you don't have clarity of it. But as things get closer, I'm like, you have a magic wand. You could ask for one thing that will guarantee your success. What are you going to ask for? It really drives them to thinking about the thing that unlocks the potential and the momentum to help them with success. It could be, I need an architect to come in and help me with this. I need another team to take this service. I need this tool. But it starts to help them to think creatively about it is not just here right now, but there are other ways to be successful in it. And how do I do that? Do I raise my hand and ask for help? Do I pair programs and something? Do I have another team lean in? And that's become really effective in ensuring that the goal is very clear and that they have a number of ways to meet the goal and the objective.
That's awesome. I love that, right? Because I think part of it is it'll help uncover the thing nobody wants to really talk about.
We just don't like asking for help for some reason. But you'll jump in and help anybody who asks you. But I'm not asking you for help. Bye.
So true. It's so true. Professionally and personally, right? Everybody.
I'm not asking for directions. What?
Well, okay, that's a whole
Ain't got
different thing.
GPS is in my phone now. I never have to do it.
Well, I just don't like going backwards. I'll keep driving. The whole turning
I'm not
back.
turning around.
I can't do it. I don't know what's wrong. There's so many other. But you bring up a great point. And has that realization of asking for help, has that been part of, like you mentioned, how mentorship and participating in some of these panels have influenced your professional journey and some of your decision making? Is that part of what's helped you over the last, I'll stop with the joke after this, but the 36 months, right? Is that part of what's helped you accelerate your career is asking for help and recognizing that you need help?
Yes.
And then actually having the courage, because it does take courage to ask for help.
Yeah. I mean, there is a moment in my career where I truly embraced vulnerability. And part of that vulnerability is saying I'm human and I need help. And I'm going to ask for a mentor, or I'm going to ask for a coach, or I'm going to ask somebody else to come in and stare at this design and tell me where I'm wrong. Because when you do that, you start to tap into a network and you build just trust and relationships, but you also unlock the thing that was blocking you to begin with, which is really important for your success. Continuing to allow that to block you doesn't help you grow. And digging in and being stubborn and I'm going to do it myself doesn't help you grow either. And the more people see you as a leader be vulnerable in that aspect, the more they're fine saying, oh my God, I need someone to help me on this. Can you pair program with me? Because I'm not quite understanding that repo. Or I'm running into a bug and I've been on this for about 3 hours. I could really use someone else's help, as opposed to I'm just going to continue to swirl and potentially let my commitment slide, right? But the more we as leaders say, you know what, it is okay to need help because I don't have every answer. I can't even assume to have every answer. And thinking that I do just makes me even more fallible than asking for help. It's a real big unlock for yourself and your own personal journey. And it really kind of starts to unlock some of that like imposter syndrome stuff that I have to be the smartest person or I have to know everything. No, I don't. What I have to do is be able to solve the problems, and that solve may be asking for help. But the more we do it, the more we make it okay for others to do it.
Yeah, I like to tell all of my employees that I make mistakes on purpose. It wasn't a real mistake. I was just trying to be vulnerable. That's my strategy of like, I didn't goof that up on accident. I did it. It was intentional. That's my move. It's working out great.
I have no problem giving my mistakes. I tell my teams all the time, I'm like, my first child needs a ton of therapy. My second and third, though, they're doing a lot better.
That's the way it works. You know, we could have a whole podcast. And I got twins at the beginning, so we doubled up our mistakes. Hopefully they never listen to this podcast. They know. They know. They're aware. I'm like, why don't I yell at the other ones as much as you? Probably because of stuff I did. Right. So, Christina, thank you so much for taking the time to join us on the podcast. Really love it. Tremendous success you've had. Good luck with everything you're doing over at Echo.
Thank you.
It's a huge part of the Chicago ecosystem. You know, it's one of those organizations that I think are like perfectly situated for Chicago, right? Like hard tech jobs, right? Where it's like we move stuff, we do things. It's 3-dimensional, right? It actually has value. It's not just some kind of silly video game on a phone.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. And listeners, we're always hiring. So I'd love to have an engineer hit us up, be part of our journey of transformation. It's exciting. We are growing and we are really trying to disrupt the logistics space. So thank you.
Awesome. Well, we also want to thank our listeners. We really appreciate everyone taking the time to join us.
And if you'd like to receive new episodes as they're published, you can subscribe by visiting our website at dragonspears.com/podcast, or find us on iTunes, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts.
This episode was sponsored by Dragon Spears and produced by Dante32.